back at the live stream now in AgriLand's 10th Ploughing Championships, and I'm joined by Pat McCormack, the President of the ICMSA, to discuss findings from a new ICMSA Irish Examiner survey. Pat, there was some very interesting findings that came out as a result, particularly on the issue of Brexit, where the survey found that 52% of farmers out there would be willing to make a concession on the Irish border issue in order to avoid a hard deal, a no-deal Brexit, which flies in the face, I suppose, of the government's position on the issue of the border. What's your response to that finding?
Well, Claire, it doesn't surprise me. It was a survey of farmers at various different shows around rural Ireland over the summer months. Obviously, it's a reflection of the anxiety that's out there as a result of the potential consequences of a hard Brexit, and indeed any form of a Brexit, but in particular a hard Brexit. I suppose the one finding that I did find surprising was that 47% of people surveyed were very, very happy with what the Taoiseach was doing, and it's very, very seldom a political activist gets that kind of support. So that was a surprise as well, it's fair to say. But look, obviously, it's individuals and their views. Certainly, I think policy and status quo has to remain, where we're very, very much in favour of remaining with status quo as it is, because it's absolutely imperative for, in particular, the dairy industry. You take the likes of Lakelands, they have 32,000 crossings across, if there was to be a potential border annually, and that would add massive costs, as well as the confusion and the consternation of having 9% of Northern Ireland, of the milk processed in the Republic of Ireland, is brought down from Northern Ireland. It's 25% of their milk pool. So, there's huge consequences both for Irish Creaming Milk Suppliers Association members and for farmers and people right around this island.
And I'll come back to more findings in the survey in a second, Pat, but I suppose the government and the EU, they've yet to announce the details on how farmers here would be supported. If Prime Minister Boris Johnson takes the UK out on the 31st of October, and it's 5 weeks away, is it time for the government to be more transparent about what plans?
It's very much time for the government, I think, to come clean. It's fair to say that they have indicated that they have our back, but it's our pocket that will be empty as a result of a Brexit that would go wrong. It's absolutely imperative. The 100 million Beam Fund and the conditions associated with that has created a greater degree of anxiety about where we are as regards compensation for any form of a Brexit that is anyway hard. Obviously, struggling with the Beam scheme in particular, I suppose, with 50 million from Irish funding and 50 million from EU funding to support farmers up to the 12th of May. The 5% reduction in livestock units has proved hugely prohibitive for farmers entering the scheme. So, we need to see compensation without restriction on the farmers' day-to-day running of their business, and that's absolutely imperative from the 12th of May right through to today, and from today right through to D-Day as regards Brexit, and indeed beyond.
Do you think a deal is still achievable at this stage?
Well, after giving a week at beef talks, I'm not sure that a deal is ever achievable or fully delivered, but certainly there is plenty of time for negotiations. I have no doubt that it will really only start 30 days out from now. Probably, I suppose, it will crank itself up somewhat the 1st of October, but from the 15th on, one would imagine that there'd be substance put to the deal. And obviously there's the potential, to have a Brexit without a deal and a transition period, and how that works. That might be the compromise at some point in time in the last week of October. Maybe the UK, who knows? There's so many ifs and buts. Is there potential there for the UK to further the ferret? Will there be a UK election? These are all the questions that cannot be answered by Pat McCormack or Claire McCormack or anybody else. It's out of our hands, and that's the real concern.
Pat, there were some other very interesting findings in the survey in terms of sustainability and climate change. Can you give us an outline of some of the other results that you came across?
I suppose farmers are very much anxious to embrace climate change, and that's become clear that there's a greater degree of awareness out there about climate change. But equally, and we done a pre-budget submission there a number of weeks ago, our government are going to have to concentrate on climate change, not just as a talking shop, but incentives for farmers to improve things. We as an association held a climate think tank there in recent weeks, where we had individuals from all the stakeholders including the environmental lobby groups and that, for a sit around the table to discuss the issues, because the farmer has as much of a stake in climate change and having a sustainable environment as anybody else, because we live on the land and we try to make our living from the land, and we need to protect it for the generations to come, as a workforce but also as a community.
Do you think that the levels of implementation there on the sustainability side and in terms of tackling climate change differs between the sectors in terms of implementing efficiencies?
Well, obviously Ireland...
Like, what's the dairy side doing?
Well, we've a lot of things. There's the Met curve obviously introduced by Tegas, where there's significant gains to be made there from an environmental efficiency point of view with EBI, for example, in the breeding index. You have low emission slurry spreading, and you have protected urea, which can deliver significantly, for the advantage from a climate point of view. Obviously you have ammonia as well, and that needs to be tackled, and maybe the covering of overground slurry tanks can be an issue, can be a saver there. But we have to give across a green image as well. We would have lobbied hard during the pre-budget submission from a solar point of view, that solar energy can be harvested at farm level. There's a great infrastructure out there in farmyards, sheds, whether they're dairy, beef or poultry or pig or anything else, that could be used. They're used across Europe, and if they could be harvested and fed back in both to their own supply network and to the national grid, any surplus, it could be the difference in a difficult year from an economic point of view, whether they can stay on the land or not. And we don't want to see these initiatives targeted at multinational investors to come and buy a tract of hill or a tract of flat land across rural Ireland and invest there and harvest not alone the energy but the financial reward that would be there. We want to see it rolled out at farm level.
You mentioned there about the low emission slurry spreaders. What about access to funding for those types of for that type of equipment going forward?
Yeah, we would have lobbied. Obviously, they're eligible in the TAM scheme. We would have put in our submission that the young farmer obviously gets a 60% fund rather than in comparison to the 40%. And we feel from a low emission slurry point of view, they are a very expensive machine, that all farmers should be eligible for the 60% and that they should be VAT exempt if we're to be serious about meeting our obligations. Obviously there's a 6 to 12 month waiting list on those machines, and they're very popular. You can see it going around the site here at the Plough Match, the various different suppliers, where there are people gathering, observing those machines, and I'm sure inquiring about the cost, which is very large, and a significant investment for farmers.
Pat, I suppose I'd love to ask you as well, just there have been further developments on the beef situation overnight since we last spoke. We've had Dawn Meats come out and issue further legal threats against the beef plan movement in this case. The timing of this, I suppose, a couple of days after the agreement was reached. Do you have a view on that? Do you think, how is that going to impact on the agreement? Claire,
I'll be straight out about it, Claire. Disappointed that it has happened. Can understand the frustration from a Dawn point of view, but I would ask him, we've asked farmers to in the cold light of day, to have a good examination of the agreement and to analyse it. I would ask the meat plants and Meat Industry Ireland to take the step back as well. We would have asked them, last week during the talks and even prior to the talks, to take that step back. Farmers are very, very apprehensive about putting their trust and faith in moving off the line. That's understandable. It has taken a long time to come to where we are. It's a time for cool heads, but it's a time for cool heads on all sides, including the Meat Industry Ireland. And disappointed with that development today. There's no point in saying otherwise, Claire.
Pat, the Restaurant Association of Ireland has also issued statements this morning raising concerns about supply for the restaurants, beef supply for the restaurants. What do you think of their position on this coming out now and raising concerns about there being impacted?
It was heartening to see that they want to continue to promote and provide Irish beef, and that's absolutely imperative. I suppose, Claire, it really highlights where the industry is at this point in time, that we need to sort ourselves out this week and be in a position to be back up and running the 22nd or 3rd of September. It's absolutely imperative. There's a degree of frustration out there. The farmers that arrived at the picket lines were frustrated, and that's why they arrived there. They are hugely concerned about putting their trust in this deal. But at this point in time for the industry, I think it is imperative, because listening to farmers, and 9 out of 10 farmers that came in fact 99 out of 100 farmers that came in to us over this morning and yesterday, want to kill cattle. They want to move on. They'll give this deal 6, 8, 10 weeks to see if it delivers for farmers, and they have assured us they'll be back out in the picket lines at that point in time. But it's to build that trust and to move forward with the industry is the critical thing.
Pat, just finally, just back to the survey results. 500 farmers took part in this survey from across the country. You do this survey every year. How would you describe just the general sentiment out there at the moment when it comes to, I suppose, planning for the future of Irish agriculture? Is there...
I'm smiling at you because I'm after doing an interview just before I came up with the Examiner again, as regards what you would say to young farmers. I think Irish agriculture is in a unique position that we have one of the most environmentally sustainable beef production systems in the world, and equally one of the most, if not the most sustainable from an environmental point of view, dairy systems in the world. There will be opportunities. You look at the age profile, I think there is a future in Irish agriculture, but we need to get the message across, and I would have said it to the Borbia executive numerous times, and Ornua as well. We need to get the message across that while the standards are rising for farmers, we have seen stagnation in price over the last 20-25 years. The standards have been a cost to farmers, and the consumer is going to have to shoulder some of that cost from here on.
Okay, Pat, look, we'll come back to that issue again. Thank you very much for joining us on the live stream. We'll be back again soon. Thanks for watching.